Welcome to Meet the Press Now. I'm Yamiche Alcindor. Candidates in 6 states are making their final pushes ahead of tomorrow's primaries, where once again the biggest races feature fights between the progressives and the establishment wings of the Democratic Party. Right now, the most closely watched race is the Wisconsin governor's primary. There, Democratic Socialist State Representative Francesca Hong appears to have a lead over Milwaukee County Executive David Crowley, who is backed by the current Democratic governor. In the run-up to the election day, Hong has sought to distance herself from some of her previous left-wing stances. Here's what she told my colleague, Kelly O'Donnell, on the program just over a week ago.
So you may distance yourself from the National Party, but you do consider yourself a Democratic Socialist, right?
Yes, because it allows me to make sure that the policies that we are supporting, the universal policies that will build permanent affordability, universal child care, paid leave for all, investing in that care economy with minimum wage and raising that minimum wage and strengthening unions by repealing Act 10. These are policies that are rooted in democratic socialism, something that our state has a deep history in.
Meanwhile, in the Minnesota Democratic Senate race, Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan is occupying the progressive lane against Congresswoman Angie Craig, who is touting her electoral record, flipping a Republican-held seat in 2018. It's been a bruising primary, with the pair clashing over issues including immigration and Governor Tim Walz's handling of a fraud scandal. We'll talk with the Lieutenant Governor about her message to voters in just a moment. Yesterday, speaking with Kristen Welker on Meet the Press, Michigan Democratic Senate nominee Abdul El Sayed brushed off efforts by Republicans to paint the progressive message as radical.
At the end of the day, it's not radical to believe that people should be able to afford their groceries. It's not radical to believe that you should have health care in this country. It's not radical to believe that you don't think the president should be able to deny elections or make $2.2 billion off of his role in office. It's not radical to believe that all of us should be able to breathe clean air and drink clean water. Those are the things that I've been fighting for. I believe in an America where all of us can come together to build together, government of the people, by the people, and for the people.
Beyond Wisconsin and Minnesota, we'll also be watching key races tomorrow in Connecticut, Alabama, Vermont, and South Carolina, where Republicans are holding a special primary election to replace the late Senator Lindsey Graham on November's ballot. It's a crowded field in South Carolina. President Trump is throwing his support behind Graham's sister, Darlene Graham, who was appointed to the seat after her brother's passing last month. And joining me now is our NBC News team on the ground covering these primaries. Shaquille Brewster is in Madison, Wisconsin, and Ryan Nobles is in Columbia, South Carolina. Thank you both for being here. Shaq, I want to start with you. With 1 day to Election Day, what's the closing message to both Hong and Crowley to voters?
Hi there, Yamiche. Well, for Hong, it's really getting past some of that scrutiny that she's been under about her previous comments and backtracking and clarifying those and really talking about policy. You've heard her really close on talking about free child care, universal child care, free lunch, raising taxes for the wealthy here in the state of Wisconsin. But her opponent, David Crowley, has been trying to use this momentum that he feels he has because of the scrutiny that she's been facing. He's about to have an event right behind me at this campaign office that's going to be a canvas launch, getting those last-minute voters to the polls tomorrow. Listen to a little bit of what he told me in our conversation.
Feel as if you're the underdog right now?
Look, I think that in this race, people are just wondering who is the best candidate. And, I think that, some people may have looked at me as the underdog in the very beginning, but I think with the momentum that we have captured, right now I feel like, this is a two-person race. And so, my job is just to focus, have tunnel vision. I have fought my entire life not to be labeled, not to be placed in a box. And so it gets frustrating when you have been helping communities your entire life, get access to success. And so for me, yes, it is frustrating. I've never tried to protect the establishment. This has always been about lifting up people who have never had their voices be heard.
Crowley has rejected the outside labeling of this race. He says he does not see himself as the establishment candidate, but he is going up against a candidate who is a progressive, a democratic socialist, who's trying to occupy that lane. And going into Election Day, you see the polling. She has a strong lead. The question is, are those polls correct? And will she be able to hold that despite the scrutiny that she's been facing?
Well, that's the key question, right? So Crowley had actually suspended his campaign before re-entering the race, but he has managed to get the endorsement of the sitting governor. So is that, you think, going to be enough for him to get over those numbers you just mentioned?
He's hoping that it is enough. I mean, the word that he continued to use in our conversation is momentum. He feels as if he's closing the gap. He feels as if voters are starting to listen to him. You know, this race has been chaotic. It's been messy, and that's coming from an objective perspective. You had the frontrunner last month drop out because of campaign finance reporting. You had the former lieutenant governor, who was the Senate candidate here in 2022, drop out amid investigations into what was considered inappropriate relationships with women. He has denied that. That's Lieutenant Governor Mandela Barnes. So there's been a lot of drama in this race. Crowley believes that when people focus on the issues and when they focus on the fight that's ahead in November, people will gravitate toward him. That is a big question going into Election Day.
Well, Shaq, you mentioned the issues. How different is Hong as a candidate than some of the other progressives we've seen run in these statewide races?
Yeah, so some of the similarities are in policy. You hear her talk about Medicare for all for a statewide level that's expanding Medicaid here. One thing that is a key difference is that she doesn't have the support of a lot of those national progressives. You know, we have seen Ilhan Omar, the congresswoman from the neighboring state, come here and campaign with her, but you haven't seen the endorsement from Bernie Sanders, AOC. In fact, they were asked that both separately just yesterday. Listen to their responses when asked if they're endorsing in this race.
I haven't endorsed in that race. My focus has been in winning back the Congress.
Look, we have a limited number of races that we can be involved in. Most of my focus on is getting people elected to the United States Senate, getting people elected to the House of Representatives.
They're making the case that they're focused on the federal offices rather than the statewide offices, but that's a key factor, that she doesn't have the support of some of those national progressives. Guys?
Well, thanks so much, Shaq, for getting it all there. Of course, getting those candidates. Ryan, of course, we have to go to you. You're in South Carolina. You're talking to voters. What are they telling you about this crowded ballot?
Well, I think that you hit the right word when you mentioned that, Yamiche. Crowded is really the overwhelming sense of what we've got here tomorrow. And because there are so many candidates on the ballot, every person we talk to believes that this will eventually go to a runoff, that no one will clear that 50% threshold, including Darlene Graham, who is, of course, the sister of the late Lindsey Graham and is coming into this primary with the endorsement of President Donald Trump. Even though she has that endorsement, even though many Republican voters here in South Carolina think very highly of her late brother, they are somewhat suspectful of her lack of experience, despite the fact that Trump is behind her. Listen to what some of them told us.
I don't vote for someone unless I know what they are and what they're about. She has no track record. Can't vote for someone who's ever run a race. You ever bet on a horse that's a long shot? You don't want to do that.
I think she was a great pick to finish out Lindsey's term, but with the lack of experience in government, I don't think she's certainly not my pick to fill Lindsey's seat. She says she's going to support Trump at every turn, which I'm a Trump supporter, but I don't need a senator that blindly supports a party.
Will you throw your support behind whoever the Republican is?
It would depend on who it is.
Really? If it's Darlene, does she have your vote?
At this point, no.
Now, that doesn't mean that President Trump's not going to play a big role in all of this. He's going to hold a tele-rally for Darlene Graham tonight. He's made it very clear that he's behind her, and we've seen his track record in these Republican primaries, Yamiche. Generally, the Republican candidate that has Trump's backing generally wins. I think tonight, though, is about just getting to that runoff for Darlene Graham and then seeing what happens at the next stage.
Well, I wonder, if you're talking about the next stage, if Graham doesn't win tomorrow and has to go to a runoff, do we expect the president to support whoever the nominee is? Meaning, even if she either wins or something happens, do we think the president will pick somebody else?
I think it's a great question. And I think he will certainly, at the end of the day, support the Republican nominee, whoever that may be. But if there is a runoff here in South Carolina that is absent Darlene Graham, and I should make it clear, I don't think we think that's what's going to happen, but it's very difficult to predict what's going to happen here because this is such an unprecedented situation and because there's almost no polling on this. But if Darlene Graham is not in that second round, it's hard to imagine that President Trump puts his thumb on the scale for someone. Ralph Norman, who's one of the leading candidates here, sitting member of the House, not running for re-election to the House, he's somebody that endorsed Nikki Haley when she ran for president. So he doesn't have the closest relationship with President Trump. Russell Fry, another member of the House, would definitely consider himself a strong Trump supporter, but he's not somebody who Donald Trump is specifically tied to. So it is definitely an open question as to who Trump would get behind in a runoff. And you can bet that that's going to be the most important thing on the docket for whomever gets to the next stage of this.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Ryan, reporting for us from South Carolina. Joining me now is Minnesota's Democratic Lieutenant Governor and candidate for Senate, Peggy Flanagan. Thank you so much for being here, Lieutenant Governor. It's just one day until Election Day. What is your closing message to voters heading into the polls tomorrow?
So this entire campaign has been about the many versus the money. I am part of the many, and I'm betting on us. You know, I haven't taken a dime of corporate PAC money, and the same can't be said for my opponent. This is the most expensive Senate primary in Minnesota history. About $20 million has come in against us so far. But what I can tell you is that I'm running to make sure that people can afford the lives they want to live. I want to get big money out of our politics, and I want to fight for, things like Medicare for all, so that people aren't just paying for health insurance, but actually have access to health care.
You talk about this race being about money. The Congresswoman's campaign has spent significantly more money than your own, and you've suggested that she's bought and paid for by special interests. Do you think that kind of attack, though, makes it harder to unify Democrats, even if you win, especially those who hold similar positions than the Congresswoman?
Well, I would say this. I think this is something that you're seeing all across the country, that, individuals know that corporate PACs, special interests, have tremendous influence in our politics. And I think, they've got great representation. It's the rest of us who need it. I think that's the root of so many things that we're facing in this country. Health insurance companies are funding my opponent, and, I support Medicare for all, and she doesn't. The crypto industry has weighed in this race. I think we need to have some pretty serious regulations on crypto. And Congresswoman Craig was the only Minnesota Democrat to vote, for the crypto bill that has allowed Donald Trump to enrich himself, to over $1 billion in his meme coin from the Oval Office. So I just think that people are ready, to be beholden only to the voters and no one else. And the best way to end Citizens United is to ensure that we are running strong grassroots, people-powered campaigns and winning. That's what we've done, and that's what I hope to do tomorrow.
Talking about your campaign and who's powering it, you have the backing of outgoing Senator Tina Smith, as well as Senator Bernie Sanders, his endorsement. Take a listen to what Senator Sanders said yesterday.
People are tired of the status quo politics and establishment policies. They want real change, and Peggy Flanagan is about bringing about real change, standing up to the big money interests.
You are confident Flanagan will win?
No, I'm not confident. I think it's going to be a very, very close race.
Okay.
I think she's being outspent 7-1. And under those circumstances, it's tough for anybody to win.
So he's endorsing you, but a little worried about whether or not you're going to actually be able to win. What do you make of the senator's assessment, and how do you feel about this primary possibly being an uphill battle? Do you see it that way?
Well, I think for, a long time, we've been underestimated. They're not underestimating us anymore with spending, $20 million in this race. We always knew that it was going to tighten up. But what I can tell you is that we've got a strong ground game. Just over this weekend, we knocked 32,000 doors. We will have knocked over 200,000 doors by the end of the election tomorrow when the polls close. So I feel confident that we've got a strong ground game. This is up to the people of Minnesota, if they want to send someone who's, beholden to corporate special interests, or if they want to send someone who's beholden only to Minnesotans. This campaign is about people being able to afford the lives they want to live. I've got a long track record of fighting for working families, and I hope to be able to continue that work in the U.S. Senate.
Lieutenant Governor, a lot of your message is about change. Obviously, you hold a statewide position as Lieutenant Governor. Do you feel like that position has been a drag on your campaign? It's been hard maybe for some to see you as change since you're already in office?
Well, I'd say this, my core, I've always been an organizer. And so while my occupation might have changed over the years, that's always been the same. The things that we've won on here in Minnesota, I co-chaired the campaign to raise the minimum wage when I was the executive director of Children's Defense Fund. We got that done. We indexed it to inflation. And so now every year over the last decade or so, the minimum wage has gone up in our state. They haven't increased the federal minimum wage in over 17 years. It's still $7.25. I'd like to bring that experience to the U.S. Senate. When my daughter was still portable and on my hip, I was one of the co-founders for Minnesotans for Paid Family and Medical Leave. We built a coalition. It took almost a decade, but we got it done. And I think in Minnesota, we know that you get what you organize for. So if I'm a school board member, a state legislator, running the Children's Defense Fund, lieutenant governor, or Siobhan's mom, I know what I'm working towards. And I think Minnesotans know that too.
You talk about sort of all the different issues that you're running and sort of your views, but I want to go back to that other question I asked you, which is how do you unify a party after such a competitive primary? Is it hard in some ways to have all these issues and to be talking about your opponent in the way that you're talking about your opponent as still a fellow Democrat? Do you think that there's in some ways going to be a chance to unify the party, or is it really going to be a broader anti-Trump message?
I mean, I think it has to be a broader anti-Trump message. And I certainly think that's where, Congresswoman Craig and I will be unified in making sure that Democrats hold this seat no matter what happens. We can't afford to give this, Donald Trump one more seat in the United States Senate. The grift has to stop. We will hold this seat. And if she is victorious tomorrow, I will absolutely support her. What is at stake is too much. And I think Michelle Tafoya will be the Republican Senate nominee going forward. She's completely out of touch with Minnesotans and with the average Minnesotan and what they're facing. And so the stakes are too high for us not to unify. And if I am victorious, I will work my tail off to make sure that I can build a relationship, build trust with her supporters so that we can beat the Republicans in the fall and refuse to give Donald Trump a majority. And we're going to take back the Senate and we're going to take back the House.
I want to ask you about the broader progressive movement and the momentum we're seeing around the country. There's a lot of comparisons being made between last week's primary in Michigan and your own message. What do you make of that? Do you think it's similar to Abdul El Sayed's?
I mean, I think what we see happening all across the country is that people are ready for big, bold change. They are done with the status quo. They are sick of, corporate PACs and special interests and AIPAC, spending a tremendous amount of money in these elections when really voters should be the one to decide. I think, this is an election, not an auction, and we have to be really clear about that. So I think that's the message that's resonating with voters all across the country. We are done with the status quo. We're done nibbling around the edges. We're done governing by sternly worded letter. And people really want fighters and want to know that the folks in Washington, D.C. Are not, just caught up in what's happening in the Beltway, but are deeply connected to the people that they represent. And that's what this campaign has been about since day one.
I want to ask you about language while we talk about this progressive movement. You and El Sayed have rejected the label of socialist, but that certainly has not stopped Republicans from making an attack against both of you. The president has even gone farther, calling all Democrats communists. Do you worry about those attacks turning some voters away from your campaign? And how do you think progressives overall can overcome that?
I mean, I am the endorsed candidate of our Democratic Party here. We have the Democratic Farmer Labor Party that's always been grounded in the lives of working families, both in urban communities and in greater Minnesota. And, that's what my campaign is all about, people affording their lives. And I think that, regardless of if you are a Democrat, a Republican, an independent, someone who, doesn't identify with any political party, the thing that we can all agree on right now is that the folks at the very, very top, the ultra wealthy in this country, are doing quite well. For goodness sakes, this big, ugly bill that was passed had trillions of dollars in tax cuts for billionaires. And, the folks folks who are being left behind are working families. We literally saw, Donald Trump and the Republicans take food off of the table, tremendous cuts to Medicaid as well, all in exchange for tax breaks for the ultra wealthy.
Yeah.
I think, it is literally all of us against Donald Trump, the extremist billionaires. And frankly, I'm betting on us. And I think we can build these relationships and turn people out.
Well, certainly the message I'm sure you will be saying from now until tomorrow. Thank you so much, Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan, for your time. And again, good luck. We'll be following your race for sure.
Thank you.
Coming up, we'll dig into a different kind of intra-party fight. A 28-year Democratic incumbent is in the fight of his political life against challengers who say it's time for a new generation of leadership. We'll have back-to-back interviews with the congressman and his top opponent next. And speaking of tomorrow's primaries, tune in to Kornacki Cam for special election night coverage starting at 7 p.m. Eastern on NBCNews.com and YouTube. You're watching Meet the Press Now. Welcome back. As we mentioned, there will also be Democratic primaries in Connecticut tomorrow. But unlike what we've seen in other races, this fight isn't over ideology, but rather it's about generational change. In Connecticut's first congressional district, incumbent John Larson is facing a primary for the first time since he was elected in 1998. Tomorrow, he's facing off against 3 challengers, including former Hartford Mayor Luke Bronin, who won the state party's endorsement. And joining me now is Democratic Congressman John Larson of Connecticut. Thank you so much for being here. So you're seeking your 15th term in Congress. And as we mentioned, you are facing your first primary challenge since you were elected to the House in 1998. What do you say to those who say it's just time for generational change?
I think the change that we need is to continue to go after Donald Trump. I'm proud that I've been named on his top 10 hit list of Democrats that he wants to remove, because I've stood up to Elon Musk and I've stood up to Doge. I've stood up to ICE and taken them on directly when they came to Southington and Newington in my hometown of East Hartford and West Hartford, and taken on Donald Trump on this illegal war he's prosecuting, as we see ongoing in Iran. So I think the voters of this district are wise. They appreciate what we've been able to deliver for this district, and that's why I believe they're going to support me on tomorrow on Election Day.
I hear what you're saying, Congressman. You're saying you have a history here. That said, a recent poll shows 8 in 10 Americans say they would support setting a maximum age for candidates to run for Congress. The current Congress, by the way, is the 3rd oldest in U.S. history. Is it fair, do you think, for voters to consider a candidate's age as they cast their ballots?
I think it's fair for voters to consider anything that they want. That's what a democracy is all about. But they also consider what you're able to deliver for your district and whether or not you're the person that they need in this crisis. We're in the middle of a crisis that we have to address ongoing and now. It's not going to wait for the primary. It's not going to wait for November. We have to take on Donald Trump every single day. And I have a record of doing that. And I'm running on a record. Every year that I've run for office, it's based not only on your record, but what you're currently doing now and what's your vision for the future. And my vision for the future is also protecting and saving Social Security, which is vitally important to all 300 million Americans plus. And that's why I think the people of this district know what I've been able to do, trust in me to keep on delivering for this district, and know that that makes a big difference in their lives.
Yeah. Well, you're talking about support. You do have the endorsements of key leaders in Washington, including Leader Jeffries in Connecticut's congressional delegation. But your opponent, Luke Bronin, received the Democratic Party endorsement at the district convention. Do you think that's a sign that delegates...
endorsement of the Working Families Party?
Could I just ask you, though, do you think that endorsement shows that local leaders and delegates are looking for change?
No, I do not think it's so. That's 475 people in a room. But I have the endorsement of Working Families. I have the endorsement of over 38 labor groups. I have the endorsement of more elected officials, every sitting member in the congressional delegation, because they understand what I've been able to deliver. They understand that they're able to work with me, and they understand what I've been able to accomplish on their behalf. Luke Bronin has no record. I'm running on a record of accomplishment and achievement. Luke Bronin is promoted by billionaires who are opposed to my challenging them and saying they're going to have to pay their fair share of Social Security, that they'll actually have to ante up. Currently, Elon Musk pays nothing for Social Security. People in this district don't think that that's fair. Those are the individuals that are supporting Luke Bronin. I'll stand with the people and the working families of this district who know what I'm able to deliver.
As you bring up Luke Bronin, I want to read to you part of an op-ed that he wrote. He said, everything changed when Trump got reelected, and yet too many Democrats are pretending things haven't really changed. Too many Democrats still think the answer is another strongly worded letter, another press release, or another speech to an empty committee chamber for the C-SPAN cameras. What's your response to that? Have Democrats done enough, in your opinion, to fight back against the Trump administration?
It didn't change. It didn't change when he was running for governor and asked me for my support and told me I was the greatest congressman this district ever had. It didn't change when we got over $1 billion of support for the city of Hartford. It changed when Luke Bronin's ambition changed and he no longer was running for governor. That's the plain, hard truth. And so, no, I don't take that comment seriously at all. I think people know the record of achievement, know what I've been able to deliver for the district, and are going to come out and support me. I'm enthused by the kind of support we are getting day to day, knocking on doors, making the phone calls, putting out the postcards, and doing a total grassroots initiative to make sure we bring home this victory.
And you've brought up Social Security. You are the top Democrat on the Social Security subcommittee of the House Ways and Means Committee. Your opponent says you've been unable to deliver on protections to Social Security. If you win this race and Democrats take back the House, how do you plan to make sure your Social Security legislation can pass the House and Senate and ultimately get signed by President Trump?
We had Hakeem Jeffries come to this district just about 3 months ago and talked about this specifically. The Social Security 2100, which is my bill, will be brought up in the first 100 days that Democrats are back in control.
How are you going to get it through the Senate and signed by the president?
How will we get it through the Senate? Once Americans start to vote. Once people see what's in there, once you know that your Social Security is going to be increased overall, once you know that you're a woman and you've been getting below poverty level checks from Social Security, and that's going to change. Once you're able to see that there's no longer taxed and the vote is passed and achieved, how are they going to vote against that in the Senate? The pressure will come from the people of this great nation of ours. Yeah. It's long overdue. All the major groups, the working families, Social Security networks, all across this country, all support this endeavor. It's long overdue. It's been more than 50 years since we've enhanced Social Security. That's why it's so important. And 10,000 baby boomers a day become eligible for Social Security. And for more than 40% of all Americans, it's the only benefit that they have.
Well, you're certainly fired up and ready to go. So thank you so much, Congressman John Larson, for joining us.
Perpetrated in this are false.
Yes. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming on the program. For more on this race, I'm joined by now one of the congressman's challengers, former Hartford Mayor Luke Bronin. So you heard your name brought up policy-wise. Where do you differ from the congressman? And is this about sort of ideology, or do you really think this is purely about generational change?
I think this is about, first of all, thanks for having me on. It's good to see you. I think this is about building a Democratic Party that is bringing a whole new energy to this fight, that recognizes we've got a president who is out of control. We've got costs going through the roof, ICE running wild, and we have a Democratic Party that is just not been clear or bold enough about the changes we need to make. And so if we're going to have a chance to vote on any of the things that are going to make change, we've got to build a different kind of movement, a movement that is strong enough to defeat Donald Trump, to defeat the MAGA movement, to shift the political tide. And I think we would be a stronger Democratic Party if more of our leaders recognize that part of leadership is knowing when it's time to pass the torch.
You talk about passing the torch. Why do you think the congressman needs to pass the torch and is no longer able to fight the Trump administration effectively?
Congressman Larson has been in Congress for 28 years. He's been in elected office for about 50 years. And for the last 10 years or so, I just think he's gotten stuck in a routine. And I understand, it's hard to find anybody who does the same thing for 30 years and doesn't get a little bit stuck in the routine. But this is not a moment that we can keep doing the same thing. You talked for a while with Congressman Larson about his Social Security bill. He's introduced the same bill every year for 12 years. And every year he tells the voters, this is the year it's going to get passed. Even when he was chair of the Social Security Subcommittee and Democrats had the White House and the Senate and the House, and his bill didn't even get out of his own committee. So I think it's fair to ask, what is that seniority getting us? And more importantly, this isn't a moment that's about the subcommittee rooms. This is about the movement we need to build outside the walls of the Capitol if we're going to have a chance of fixing this mess, stopping Trump, defeating the MAGA movement, and fixing the big things that are broken in our system.
As you talk about building a movement, what specifically do you think you would do differently to fight back against the Trump administration than Congressman Larson? And what is he not doing, frankly, that you would do?
Well, again, until this campaign started, the only thing I'd heard Congressman talk about for many years was that same Social Security bill. As a Democratic Party, I want to see us being clear and aggressive in stopping the corruption we're seeing right now, which is unlike anything we've ever seen in our country. It is corrosive, it is destructive, and we have to stop it and demand real accountability. And then on the economic issues, I want to see us seriously putting an agenda forward to the American people on things like universal health care and housing that people can actually afford, and bringing down electricity prices by making a massive commitment to renewable energy, both for the sake of costs and for the sake of the climate that our kids are going to have to live in. And I just has seen the Democratic Party be too cautious, not clear enough, and not bring anywhere near enough energy to that fight right now. The other thing is, the way that people consume information has changed. I want to see people who are out there having real unscripted conversations, in every setting, everywhere we can, every single way, every day, relentlessly. And with all respect, there's a lot of folks in Congress who I think have been there for decades. They've done good work. I respect it. But I don't see them doing that work to really win people back who've given up on what feels like a broken system.
Well, you said that Congressman Larson's seniority hasn't really got him anywhere. If you win, of course, you would be a freshman lawmaker in the House. How do you make sure that your voice is heard and that you're in the room where decisions are made when you lack that seniority?
Well, first of all, look, I think the seniority system in Congress is one of the things that's broken about our system. It doesn't make sense to organize a system just based on how long somebody's been sitting in a seat. But it's already started to change. You see some of the most effective. But let me just say, you see some of the most effective voices in our party coming from younger members. You see someone like Robert Garcia, who is in his third year in Congress, and he's the top Democrat on the Oversight Committee. So that's already begun to change. But it gets back to the heart of the issue right now, which is that the battle right now is not just inside the Capitol. It is going out and reaching those younger voters who've given up on our politics. It's having real conversations with the many people who used to vote Democratic and have given up on our party because they don't see us fighting on those core economic issues that they're seeing and feeling in their lives. And so much of the work of a member of Congress, especially while Donald Trump is president, is to be out there building a party that is strong enough, not just to ride the backlash in this one cycle and take the House back, but to make sure we win the White House and the Senate and the House. And, I'm bringing to this work a range of experience. I served in the Obama administration, was part of the team that helped to create the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau to keep Americans from getting ripped off. I served our country as a Navy intelligence officer in Afghanistan, 8 years as mayor of a city that had been left behind and a lot of people had been given up on. And people in this district know how hard I work. They know the energy I bring to it. They know what my heart is. And I think that's why we're seeing so much support around this district. That's why we won the Democratic Party.
As you talk about changing the Democratic Party, would you welcome candidates who align themselves with the Democratic Socialist movement?
Look, there are things in that national platform of the DSA that I do not agree with. But what I very much support is a big, open, spirited debate. I want a party that is having, a real competition of visions and voices. That's what we didn't get to have in 2024. That's one of the reasons why I think we're in this mess. And so I'm looking forward, both over these next 2 years, but especially in 2028, to that battle of visions and voices for our party. But I think there's a common thread that I hope we all recognize, which is that when things are broken, the answer can't be just tinkering around the edges, right? Our healthcare system needs fundamental reform. The housing market is broken so that young people and seniors alike cannot keep up. Electricity costs, at least where I live in this district, are going through the roof. So there are fundamental things broken, and the answer can't be small stuff.
Yeah, well, definitely bringing the energy. Good luck in your race, former Mayor Luke Bronin, and we appreciate you coming on.
Thanks so much for having me.
And up next, breaking news, President Trump signs an executive order aimed at reducing the number of recommended vaccines for children, claiming without evidence that it would reduce autism rates. We have the details and an important fact check. Keep it right here on Meet the Press Now. Welcome back. We are following breaking news out of the White House, where President Trump just signed an executive order aimed at overhauling the recommended childhood vaccine schedule. The order recommends fewer vaccinations and recommends splitting up the combined measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine, known as the MMR vaccine, into multiple shots.
Effective immediately, my administration is recognizing gold standard childhood vaccine recommendations for only 11 core vaccinations against the most serious and dangerous diseases, along with the MMR, which hopefully will be split up. You have the MMR, we want it in 3 separate vaccinations, given at separate times. Together, there could be a possibility they're quite lethal, and separately, it looks like they are not at all lethal, but just very effective.
The president suggested without evidence that the increased number of childhood vaccines has contributed to an increase in autism cases nationwide. NBC News health and medical reporter Erica Edwards joins me now with more. So, Erica, let's start with a really important fact check. The president suggested a link between vaccines and autism. What does the science actually say?
You know, Yamiche, that's an issue that scientists say has long been settled and thoroughly discredited. I just got off a call with the president of the American Academy of Pediatrics, who said that certainly while it's important to study autism in general, he said he didn't think that there's anything in science that's been scrutinized as much as whether or not there was a link between autism and vaccines. He said over and over, Yamiche, that answer is unequivocally no. Yamiche.
It's so important to have that fact check. There are so many people that are worried about this, especially new moms and all sorts of other people. So thanks for that. Now, what specific changes were made in today's executive order?
Yeah, this is a dramatic overhaul, cutting down the number of vaccines universally recommended for children from 18 to 11. So shots to protect against COVID, rotavirus, the flu, hepatitis A and B, as well as meningitis may be given only after a, quote, shared clinical decision-making conversation between doctors and their parents. Now, the order also recommends that immunizations be given at separate doctor's visits. And as you mentioned, and as the president said in that intro, splits the measles, mumps, and rubella vaccines into 3 separate shots, though I should point out there aren't any separate shots available for those diseases. So scientists would really have to start from the beginning on those, Yamiche.
Wow, such an important point. Does this order actually change the vaccine schedule that parents must follow, or does it really just change the recommended schedule? Tell us about the nuance there.
Yeah, this would only change what's recommended by the federal government. It's likely that states will continue to implement their own vaccine recommendations and their own schedules. Many of those states are following the guidance set by the American Academy of Pediatrics, which sticks to all 18 universally recommended shots, Yamiche.
And I mean, that important point you pointed out, which is that there's some vaccines that literally you can't even split up. So with that in mind, what is the likelihood that this will lead to a decline in vaccination rates overall nationwide?
Experts are highly concerned that this will only further drive down vaccination rates and drive up outbreaks of vaccine-preventable illnesses like measles. We've had nearly 2,500 measles cases this year alone, mostly in unvaccinated kids. And splitting those shots into separate doctor's visits likely means it will be much more difficult for families to fit in all of those appointments and get all of those shots. Yamiche.
Well, such important reporting, Erica Edwards. Thank you so much. And in the last hour, we also heard more from the president about the war with Iran. That comes after Iran issued new demands. It says the U.S. must meet to allow ships free access to the Strait of Hormuz. The demands made this weekend include lifting of the U.S. naval blockade of Iranian ports, a withdrawal of military forces from the region, and compensation for damages caused by the war. President Trump was pressed about Iran's latest demands while speaking to reporters in the Oval Office and offered this vague response.
You've also been posting about Iran today opposing their latest demands. You said this last round of talks was Iran's last chance before decapitation. So what now? What comes next?
You'll find out.
Are you still, are massive escalation, is that still on the table?
Well, we have that, certainly that ability if we want to do that. Yeah, you'll find out.
President Trump also reiterated what he said this morning on social media, that he's, quote, demanding compensation from Iran for all of the people that have been killed and gravely wounded with their roadside bombs and many conflicts. All of this comes after the president told Axios yesterday, quote, we are low-keying it with Iran. We are only semi-negotiating with them. We are just watching Iran with its huge inflation and the fact that they have no money. Joining us now to break this down is NBC News White House correspondent Monica Alba. So, Monica, the president says we're just low-keying negotiation with Iran. What in the world does that mean, and what is the status of those talks?
Yeah, low-key is not a phrase that we typically associate with President Trump, right, Yamiche? So I think that is something that surprised us a little bit. But also what it means is sort of just a summation of what we've seen over these last couple of weeks, which is the White House and the Trump administration essentially treading water, not having any diplomatic progress to show for, and not able to really coerce or force Iran into coming to the negotiating table while still preserving this potential military escalation that just a week ago the president said was potentially imminent, threatened, could be major, talking about specific threats for critical infrastructure, only to walk that back and kind of really draw down from that, indicating that maybe there was some kind of a deal that was going to emerge, but certainly that hasn't materialized. So this is a president, in our read of this, who is saying right now, in his view, he believes this is all going to work out like some game of chess. That was the language that he used. But I think it really does show that the president, who we know has been exasperated with his options, is still trying to figure out what the best path forward should be here. And we know also, Yamiche, that he is effectively in no rush to conclude this or wrap this up, even though the political pressure and the economic implications of it suggest that that may be a problem for his party in the midterms.
Well, Monica, to that point, when you're talking to your sources, does the White House and officials there, do they think this status quo is satisfactory? And why is the administration confident that economic pressure will be effective at this point in the conflict?
Yeah, and I mean, that's something that they have even tried to dub Operation Economic Fury instead of Epic Fury. They've tried to kind of use some of these different levers, whether it be sanctions or whether you continue to see this other pressure. The president, again, repeating that he believes Iran eventually will buckle, but there has been nothing to really support that so far in these nearly 6 months. And I thought it was fascinating that over the weekend, Vice President Vance kind of talked about the timeline in a way we haven't heard, which is he said, well, it's clearly not the beginning, but it's clearly not the end. We're somewhere in the middle, which could mean, is this going to stretch on for another 4, 5, 6 months? And what we've seen, what does the middle actually mean here? And he was also sort of saying that if there isn't a way out of this by economic pressure, that that's OK, too. And then potentially the administration will revert back to that major large-scale military operation. So it seems they're still considering that, but with time running out, of course, to those critical elections, Yamiche.
Yeah, well, a lot to report and a lot going on there, but even without really much changing. Thank you so much, Monica, for your reporting. And coming up, presidential planning with progressive candidates making big waves in the primaries. Democratic Congressman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is keeping her 2028 options open. Stay with us on Meet the Press Now.
What recommendations do you have for Republicans, heading into midterms right now? And are Democrats, with the candidates they're putting forward, making life easier for?
Well, the one thing is we have jihadists being elected all over the place. We have this, whether it's communism, jihadism. It's a friend of mine called up. He said, really, you should use the word jihadist because that's what's happening. These are people that have been not successful. They're people that have been, in many cases, failures. They come from other failed countries, and they come here and they tell us how to run our country. They come from places like I won't mention because I don't want to get myself into a controversy, but they come from countries that are not great.
Welcome back. That was President Trump this afternoon in the Oval Office making a rhetorical shift from calling Democrats communists to now suggesting calling them jihadists. Joining me now is today's panel, Margaret Totlev, director of Syracuse University's Institute for Democracy, Journalism, and Citizenship, Andrew Bates, who served as deputy White House press secretary during the Biden administration, and Mark Bender, Republican strategist who served as head of communications for now former House Speaker Kevin McCarthy. So thank you all for being here. I want to just go around and get reaction because jihadist is a shift, Margaret.
Yeah, although I think the communist thing will continue also.
Yeah.
But the president seems clearly to feel like there are certain races in pivotal states in which if there are candidates who are Muslim, can use the word jihadist interchangeably with Muslim. It's sort of what it sounds like. And try to scare voters into voting for what look like more traditional candidates.
Mark, what does this do? Is it helpful to have the president saying this?
Well, where we are across the board, we have a lot of different descriptions, a lot of different policies for a lot of candidates who are still relatively unknown. So even take the ones in New York who kind of had those upsets within the House.
But jihadists, is that helpful?
But my point is that there are people who have been very critical of Israel, have been very sympathetic to causes like Hamas, who have won primaries, and that to elevate those voices and it's going to be important for Republicans to elevate those voices and actually kind of encapsulate them.
Should Republicans be echoing that language?
I think that they need to look at their policies in particular and actually get down to what they're actually standing for. But of course, the president's gonna, he has his colorful language as he does.
Andrew?
What he says to me is that he is afraid. His numbers are the lowest they have ever been because he broke his promise to lower costs. He also broke his promise not to get us into new wars. And so he's resorting to trying to scare people with this sick kind of unhinged rhetoric that is not based in fact, that does not reflect the actual positions of the people he's talking about. And I think it's because he doesn't have anything to offer people about what they care about most, which is how are we going to make life less expensive? How are we going to make work pay off again? And I don't think he can talk about his actual record.
Oh, Margaret, as you can see, that's what Democrats are going to be pushing back on that language. I want to ask you, though, someone else that, of course, has been painted as radical as AOC. She's keeping the door open to a 2028 run. She obviously pushes back, frankly, on the radical label. But I wonder, how seriously do you think she's considering running for president?
Yeah, you're right. She's not only keeping the door open, she's nudging the door open a little bit further. And I think I was very interested in her sort of going public with the egg freezing and sort of her fertility comments. You see her really leaning into and sort of teasing out what kind of a candidate she would be, she could be, trying to sort of harness those social media skills. And when you're running from the left as opposed to in a centrist way that's sort of geared at a general election, you can run really hard at issues like reproductive rights without worrying about what audience you're going to insult. And it's sort of it is meant to appeal to young people, to Gen Z, and to young millennials, and to female candidates. So I think it's quite interesting. We haven't run this data yet, so I'm going to give you a preview of some Axios and Generation Lab data that's coming in the next couple of days. But we're asking younger voters who they like for president, and AOC is towards the top of those lists, not just for young Democrats, but for young independents. She's captured a lot of young people's imagination.
Andrew, what do you make of that? And does she have to do anything to win over Democrats in places like South Carolina or Iowa? Because obviously she would have to go through a primary that goes through the South and other places that maybe don't align with her views in the same way.
I respect her sharing her personal story. I think that she's really been at the forefront of what a lot of Democrats need to do to build relationships with people on a personal level and show that kind of personal openness. For me, what I will look at the most is who do the 2026 candidates who are in tough races think will help them win people over? I know she's been on the trail in Michigan recently, but I think that what she would need to do is show folks that she can figure out a way to make her populist message, which is a resonant, important message right now, get through to the kinds of swing voters that Democrats have to win back.
Mm-hmm. Mark, I want to ask you, Republican Senator Jim Banks was bullish on Republicans' hopes of winning in Michigan this November. Here's what he told Kristen yesterday.
Mike Rogers is going to win big in November. The first time in 30 years that Michigan has elected a Republican will be this November, and Republicans have never felt better about keeping the Senate majority.
We've heard similar comments from Tim Scott. Do you worry Republicans are too confident, or do you feel as confident as they do?
No, Jim Banks is a very smart guy, a smart senator. He has a really good political pulse. I think that he's right in that Mike Rogers does have a really good opening here. But also looking at the map, if you're able to block Michigan from Democrats' hands, from them holding onto it, that blocks a lot of Democrats' opportunities to actually take over the Senate. So, of course, Republicans need to do their job and show up in places like Texas and Iowa and Maine, Alaska, et cetera. But these are red states that we really have an opportunity to hold and then expand the map into Michigan.
Margaret, I want to pivot to tomorrow's all these primaries that we're going to see. Which ones are you watching closely? And maybe give us a little bit more preview stuff.
Well, I think, of course, a lot of attention, and rightfully so, on progressive candidates who are, I think, Wisconsin. We're all watching Wisconsin, right? Let's just cut to the chase.
You betcha. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I'll betcha. But yeah, the primaries are interesting because how they set up the general contests. And the question is, so many state Democratic parties, voters in these states have a young progressive wing that is really disenchanted with the establishment, wants something different. If they choose those different candidates, how does it position those general election contests? So, and I'm certainly, South Carolina as well on the Republican side, but I'm really interested in Wisconsin.
Mark, South Carolina is so interesting to me as a White House reporter because the endorsement from President Trump isn't just creating a glide path for her. So what do you make of, first of all, the sort of consequences of that endorsement not being a sort of gilded thing that she could just hold up and say, yes, I have this. But I also wonder what you make of the race overall.
Well, because it's such a short time span, it's really interesting to have the President Trump endorsement without a scenario where you have millions of dollars of ads pillaring the airwaves. You don't really get to learn a whole lot more about other candidates. So, of course, an endorsement, if that's the only thing you know about any of these candidates, that has actually a counterintuitive, a bigger deal potentially than in other races. But I also echo Margaret's thoughts that Wisconsin Dem primary for governor, that's going to be really big to watch.
Andrew, real quick.
What I think you're going to see is, you mentioned the word establishment, and I think that's an important word because you have folks in power right now who ran against the establishment and said, we will fight big money interests on your behalf. And then we all know that actions matter more than words to voters. And what we've seen is the establishment has gotten more swampy, more ensconced, while everyday people are hurting. And wherever you are in the spectrum of the Democratic Party, whether you're center left or left, folks are going to be running on that. They're going to be saying, look at these tax cuts for monopolies and billionaires while your health care got cut. And I think that is something that breaks through right now.
And Mark, what do you think tomorrow night might tell us about 2028 field and the impact of Trump and then Trumpism?
Well, largely what's going to be important to look at across the board, we've seen this through primaries already, is the intensity, the turnout for these primaries. So even if there's 7 people in a primary or 2 or 1, compare that to previous years. Thus far, it's showing that Democratic voters, they are jacked, they are ready to vote. They're energized and they are eager to participate, especially in Wisconsin. So Republicans, those who are kind of sitting on the sidelines right now, it's going to be really important for them, both in 2026 and gearing up for 2028, that this turnout factor, it's a problem on the Republican side right now.
Well, thank you so much to all of you for joining our panel. We'll be back tomorrow with more Meet the Press Now. And before we go, don't forget that with the launch of Current with Christine Roman's NBC News Now is live all day long, streamed for free from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. Eastern, Monday through Friday. There's more ahead on NBC News Now.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.